Under EU Directive 2014-24/EU, public sector procurement across the European Union requires strict transparency. We are talking about billions of euros in government spending flowing through countless municipal and national contracts every year. This volume of public spending represents a massive attack surface. The data contains millions of invoices and contracts, carrying constant risks of vendor favoritism, organized corruption, and ESG compliance failures. Finding irregularities in this mountain of data presents a severe engineering problem. The data sets are vast, but they do not contain labeled markers identifying which contracts are fraudulent. You cannot build a traditional supervised machine learning model here. A supervised model requires thousands of examples of confirmed fraud to learn from, and you cannot train an algorithm on crimes that haven't been caught yet. Yet modern audit systems can output exactly this. A specific individual public contract pulled from the database, displaying a high risk score and a clear red flag for an auditor to investigate. That flag is the product of unsupervised machine learning. Algorithms scan raw, unlabeled Finnish open data, analyzing contract values, vendor details, and dates, and hunt strictly for statistical anomalies. But an algorithmic anomaly is not evidence. To make that statistical flag legally actionable for a human auditor, we have to reverse engineer the pipeline. We have to move backward from this user interface, through the mathematics, and down to the raw data. At the end of the algorithmic pipeline, the model generates a raw mathematical output, a single anomaly score attached to a specific procurement contract. In a legal or compliance framework, a raw decimal point offers zero utility. A human auditor cannot reject a public contract simply because an opaque algorithm assigned it a score of 0.85. Opening that black box requires a specific architectural component, SHAP, or Shapley Additive Explanations. This is a horizontal waterfall chart demonstrating the SHAP values. The central vertical line is the base value. The far right marker is the final anomaly score. SHAP decomposes that final score. It calculates exactly how much specific variables push the model output away from the base average. For this flag, we can identify the exact variables driving the anomaly. The chart shows that price deviation and award frequency carry the most mathematical weight. This visual translation maps the algorithm's logic directly to human intuition. The auditor knows instantly that the machine suspects foul play because the vendor wins too often and charges too much. High-fidelity explainability is the absolute functional prerequisite of the system. Without it, the entire pipeline is useless for public auditing. The SHAP explainer requires highly structured inputs because machine learning models are blind to raw context. A raw text field containing a vendor's ID number or a standard timestamp indicating a contract date carries no mathematical signal for fraud on its own. To give the models something to analyze, we use feature engineering. This is the mathematical process of transforming contextless raw data into actionable statistical proxies. This tabular transformation shows raw Finnish open data fields on the left being mapped into calculated features on the right. The first engineered feature is contract value, normalized by category. A 10 million euro contract is suspicious for office supplies, but routine for highway construction. This equation controls for inherently expensive sectors. Next, the system engineers temporal and behavioral features. It totals the award frequency per vendor and calculates the time elapsed between the initial tender and the final award. It also calculates contract amendment frequency. This tracks how often a vendor submits a low initial bid to win the contract, only to secure post-award price hikes. These engineered features serve as the mathematical signatures for human behaviors. They convert real-world tactics like deliberate bureaucratic delays and vendor favoritism into numbers the algorithms can read. With the features engineered, the data feeds into the first of two unsupervised models, the isolation forest. The isolation forest hunts for global outliers. It targets instances of massive, blatant irregularities across the entire dataset, like an unprecedented overpricing event. This is a 2D scatter plot mapping the engineered features. Normal contracts form a dense cluster in the bottom left. The extreme outliers sit scattered far to the top right. The algorithm isolates these points through random partitioning. It randomly selects a feature and then randomly assigns a split value to slice the data space. Because normal data points are packed tightly together, the algorithm requires dozens of random splits to finally isolate a normal contract into its own box. The anomalies are different. They sit so far outside the norm that just 1 or 2 random cuts easily trap them in isolation. The mathematics here are rigid. A shorter path length, meaning fewer splits required to isolate the data point, directly equates to a higher anomaly score. We configure the pipeline with a specific baseline parameter, a 5% contamination rate. The model flags the top 5% of contracts with the shortest path lengths. Because it relies on simple random splits rather than calculating complex distances between every single data point, the isolation forest processes massive public procurement datasets with extreme speed. It operates as the pipeline's first dragnet, efficiently sweeping the entire data space for the most undeniable deviations from the norm. But the isolation forest has a blind spot. By only looking at the global picture, it completely misses systemic rot that hides within normal ranges. If a specific agency operates a subtle cartel within a low-cost niche procurement category, their corrupt contracts will not trigger a global overpricing flag. To cover this blind spot, the pipeline deploys a second model, the local outlier factor, or LOF. This chart zooms in on a local neighborhood of data. This grouping represents standard contracts within a very specific procurement category. We introduce a single anomalous point. This stray dot sits just outside the local group. To the global isolation forest, this contract looks completely normal because it isn't expensive enough to trigger a massive split. But LOF analyzes the local density deviation of the specific point. The algorithm evaluates the target point against its closest 20 neighbors. It calculates the density of those 20 neighbors and compares it to the density around our target point. If the target point is significantly more isolated than its immediate peers, it receives a high local outlier score. By combining the broad global net of the isolation forest with the precise local screening of LOF, the pipeline establishes an orthogonal matrix capable of catching both loud irregularities and quiet localized corruption. This flowchart shows the complete pipeline architecture. Millions of unlabeled public records are ingested, transformed, engineered into features, scored by unsupervised models, explained by SHAP, and converted into targeted audit priorities. However, the documentation outlines explicit limitations to this architecture. The efficacy of the mathematical models is entirely bound by the quality of the source data. Missing sustainability labels, incomplete vendor data, and non-standard historical records will compromise the output. Furthermore, unsupervised learning operates without a guaranteed ground truth. You have to anticipate a 5 to 10% false positive rate. These models detect statistical correlations. They do not declare legal convictions. Because false positives are guaranteed, the SHAP explainability layer we explored earlier is vital. The machine provides the math, but a human must review the reasoning. This pipeline does not replace human domain expertise. It functions as a highly calibrated targeting system, designed to focus an auditor's attention exactly where the mathematical risk of corruption is highest.